Hello, economic students. So let's continue looking at how the RBA targets the cash rate using their conventional monetary policy. Remember that they intervene in what's called the overnight money market, which is basically where banks will borrow or lend to each other in order to settle all the transactions and ensure they have a positive balance in their ES account. Remember, that's part of the RBA's conditions of being a bank. So in this overnight money market, there's also a third party. You guessed it, the RBA. So there's banks and the RBA. And they intervene by placing what's known as a floor. Now think about the floor in your house, or a ceiling. Think about the ceiling in your house as I look up. And the floor works to basically mean no transactions will take place below it. You can't go below your floor in your house. And the ceiling means that no transactions will take place above it. Think about the ceiling in your house. So floor, no transactions can take place below, and a ceiling, no transactions can take place above. And they put a ceiling and a floor on the price or the interest rate, or that should even say the cash rate, because that's what we call the interest rate in the overnight money market. So they're going to restrict the cash rate in the overnight money market. So the floor is basically it's what they call a deposit rate. Now, before we think about what the RBA does, think about what a deposit rate might mean to you. If you took some money to the bank and chucked it in your bank account, what would a deposit rate be? Well, it would be the percentage interest you'd receive on that deposit. It's the same for banks in their ES accounts. If they have a surplus of money, if they have a couple of $1 million sitting in their ES account and then they don't lend it to another bank, the RBA will pay them a cash rate or an interest rate called the deposit rate. Now, the deposit rate that those banks get paid is always equal to the cash rate target at that particular time. So at the moment, I believe it's 4.1%. I've given up looking because it's too depressing for me. Always minus 0.1% or 10 basis points. So the cash rate target minus 10 basis points is always what banks will get paid if they leave money in their ES accounts. Now there's also a ceiling. Remember, the ceiling, no transactions take place above the ceiling, and that is the lending rate. So in this market, if you are a bank that has a deficit at the end of the day and you need to borrow some money, but you haven't been able to do it from another bank, the RBA says, no worries, we'll lend you the money. They will lend money to those banks at the cash rate target. So again, I think 4.1%. Check that. In this case, plus 25 basis points. So they're going to charge you a bit more than the cash rate target. Now, just remember, the cash rate target is what the RBA comes out each month and says, this is the cash rate. This is what we're targeting. This is what we want the cash rate to be, but we're going to find out it's not perfect. So we have a ceiling. No transactions will take place above this ceiling, and we might talk a little bit about why. If you're a bank that needed money, you needed to lend money because you had a deficit, why would you pay a percentage above this 4.35%? You would never pay 4.36% because that's more expensive, right? You got to pay more interest. So you would only ever at max pay the lending rate. And that's how it acts as a ceiling. No transactions take place above it. And if we go back to the other one here, the floor, if you were a bank that was going to lend money to another bank, remember, all banks are profit-making institutions. They want to make as much money as they can. And you could receive interest from the RBA at 4%, which is 4.1 minus 0.1, at 4%. Why would you lend money to some other bank at 3.99 or anything lower? You wouldn't, because you can get 4% from the RBA just by leaving the money in your ES account. So by that sort of logic, it acts as a floor. No transactions will take place below this rate. Okay, let's have a look at it on the demand and supply diagram. So that's just a summary of what I just said. Together, they're called the policy interest rate corridor because between that corridor will be the actual cash rate. Don't forget, I'll talk about that in a moment, but let's look at it on a demand and supply diagram. Now, at this point, you might want to pause and just have a think about it. I'm going to go through this quickly, but do pause at some point. First of all, you can notice that the supply curve is perfectly inelastic. That's because the RBA controls the supply of ES balances or money in these accounts or in this market. Secondly, you can see the price is the cash rate up here, which is the interest rate in the overnight money market. There's a quantity of ES balances, which is just the cash in this account. You can also see here the deposit rate. This is the floor. Remember the cash rate target minus 0.1%. In this case, the cash rate target is 3.8%. So we minus 85%, we minus 0.1, and there's our floor. Now you can also see that demand curve kind of kicks into this perfectly elastic part here. And that's because remember we said no transactions, there'll be no demand for ES balances below here. The same goes in the ceiling over here, the lending rate. Remember the cash rate target, so 3.85% plus 25 basis points. So that equals 4.1%. And you can see that the demand curve also goes perfectly elastic because no transactions would take place above it. Now, between these two rates is the policy interest corridor, and that's because the actual cash rate, which in this diagram is the same as the cash rate target, could be higher. If demand for ES balances increases, so will the cash rate. And if demand for ES balances decreases, so will the cash rate. All right, in the next video, we'll look at how the RBA actually changes the cash rate target. Bye for now.